So there I was, sitting on the shaky old couch in our living room, Christmas morning, humming along like any typical holiday, except, well, not quite as typical as one might hope. Now, you have to picture this: snow gently falling outside, that weird glow from the string lights tangled in the tree, and the aroma of Mom's cinnamon rolls wafting in from the kitchen. It felt like one of those perfect moments you see in movies. But right in the middle of this postcard perfect scene, the whole room somehow spiraled into a full-blown war zone. And the battlefield? A tiny plastic stick. The TV remote. Sounds crazy, I know. How in the world could a little gadget cause a Christmas meltdown? But trust me, that remote was like the Iron Throne for Jake and me. The second it landed on the coffee table, all the warm holiday vibes vanished, replaced by this silent but deadly standoff between us. Jake, my younger brother by 2 years, was sitting there with that exact look. The one where his lips pressed tight and his eyes narrowed just a fraction. The "I'm not backing down" kind of look. I was mirroring him perfectly. Mom and Dad tried to keep their smiles going, probably hoping we'd magically decide to bond over some cheesy Christmas movie, but no such luck. The remote wobbled between us like it was some rare artifact, and each glance toward it felt like a challenge. Like whoever got their hands on it first would rule Christmas TV for the day. Meaning, all the good channels, all the prime holiday specials, and, most importantly, bragging rights that would last till, well, probably next Christmas. So, there we were, two stubborn kids locked in battle over what should have been a simple decision: what to watch first. But instead of any easy peace, it was like the remote had declared war by proxy. Jake blinked slowly and said, "So, what's the plan? You just gonna grab it or what?" His tone was that half-teasing, half-serious kind that meant he really meant business. I held eye contact, trying not to grin because I knew exactly what he was doing, throwing down the gauntlet without actually making the first move. "Nah, I'm just waiting for you to make a move," I shot back, my voice a little too steady to sound casual. And then Mom, charming as ever, chimed in from the kitchen doorway, holding her coffee like it was the last hope for peace. "Boys, can we maybe start with the Christmas specials on Channel 5? It's a classic." Dad nodded from his chair, though I could tell by the way he rubbed his forehead that he was already bracing for the fallout. But Jake and I were stuck in this weird bubble, both too stubborn to just pick up the remote and turn it on. The tension wasn't loud or explosive, it was quiet but thick, the kind of silence where you want to laugh and cry at the same time. I glanced over at Jake again, and suddenly, I realized that something as ridiculous as a plastic remote was about to completely sabotage the entire morning. And honestly, that's when I started wondering, how did we let this happen? How did a Christmas morning full of potential joy and family cheer teeter on the edge of disaster over a flimsy, blinkingly useless stick? And so began the remote war. Jake and I were kind of like those classic siblings who, if there was an Olympic sport for stubbornness, well, we both have gold medals, or at least a fierce argument over who deserves one more. I'm just saying, no one ever accused us of backing down easily. Growing up, every little competition between us was a chance to show who was, top dog. And Christmas mornings? Well, they only amped that up. So there we were, in the living room that smelled like cinnamon and pine needles, sitting opposite each other with that remote glaring at us from the coffee table like some tiny, innocent-looking plastic battleground. Mom was hovering nearby, clutching her coffee cup like a lifeline. Her eyes kept flicking between Jake and me, silently pleading for some kind of miracle peace treaty. Dad was in his recliner, eyebrows knitted tight, probably calculating how he was going to defuse this before someone ended up yelling something about ruined holidays. The stakes? Oh, they couldn't have felt higher at the moment. Whoever got the remote controlled the TV, which basically meant the power to dictate the soundtrack to Christmas morning. And for siblings locked in a year-round tug-of-war, that pretty much translated to ultimate bragging rights. I remember Jake leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on me. There was this smug little smile that itched with mischief. "Look," he said, voice all casual, "if you want it, just say it." I narrowed my eyes back at him and shot, "I'm just giving you the front row seat to my victory." Mom sighed, but it came out as a little smile. "Boys, why don't you just share? Maybe take turns?" She gave the remote a hopeful glance, like it might magically solve itself. Jake scoffed. "Share? That's like saying, let's take turns driving the family car on the way to the beach. Never gonna happen." I chuckled. Exactly. Gandhi didn't have to deal with a 2-year age gap and zero chill. Dad finally spoke, trying to sound reasonable but clearly conflicted. "How about we start with the Christmas specials on Channel 5, like Mom said? Then you can each have your picks after?" But Jake and I just kept staring each other down, sitting tight like this was some kind of negotiation tactic. The tension filled the room like a thick fog, but you know, the kind where you're sort of amused at how silly it is. This wasn't just about a remote, it was about pride, territory, ownership. Which, when you put it out like that, sounds almost dramatic for two guys on Christmas morning, but when you're in the middle of it, it's a full-on standoff. Then, in a slight move that surprised even me, Jake reached out and grabbed the remote. I blinked. Was he really making the first move? But wait, he didn't turn on the TV. No. Instead, he pulled it close but didn't press a single button. His eyes were practically daring me to react. I leaned back, feigning nonchalance but actually plotting my next move. Because if this was a game, Jake just launched the first play. Meanwhile, Mom leaned in a little closer, her voice gentle but firm. "Let's remember it's Christmas, okay?" Dad gave a little laugh, nerves still obvious, and said, "Yeah, maybe battle for the remote another day." But Jake and I? Nope. We were locked in our own private war, fireworks invisible but definitely crackling. It was as if that little plastic remote had transformed into this tiny, sarcastic symbol of all our childhood competitions, mega amplified because, well, it was Christmas. And if you think about it, those holidays are the perfect storm where family, expectations, and good old-fashioned pride mix. Like a snowball rolling downhill, gaining speed and size, ready to crash. Still, as Jake sat there clutching the remote, waiting to see if I'd make a move, I realized something else. Mom and Dad's quiet attempts at peacemaking weren't going to cut it this year. Not with us. And beneath all the cold stares and silent challenges, maybe for both of us, this wasn't just about a remote at all. Maybe it was about control. About being heard, about proving who's boss, even if just for a few silly Christmas hours. So there we were, two brothers sitting across from each other in a living room glowing with holiday cheer, utterly ignoring it while the ultimate prize sat between us. And I guessed then that Christmas morning, with all its magic and peace talks, was about to get a whole lot more interesting. Alright, so here's where things really start to spiral. Jake is still holding the remote, right? But instead of firing up the TV and blasting Home Alone or whatever classic Christmas special he'd claim as his own territory, he just sits there, smirking like he's just scored some secret victory. I lean forward again, trying to figure out if he's bluffing or just messing with me, but before I can say a thing, Jake casually, like it's nothing, slides the remote under the couch cushion. I'm staring at him like, dude, seriously? But he just shrugs and says, if you want it, come and get it. Now, I wasn't about to let him win that easily, so I dive under the couch to retrieve it while Jake sits back, arms crossed, smug as can be. It's not just a remote anymore, it's a battleground. But in the scuffle, I knock over a bunch of stuff. A few old magazines, a couple of Christmas cards we'd totally forgotten to send, and something that catches my eye, this worn-out box labeled Holiday Memories. Curious, I pull it out and open it. It's packed with old photos, cringe-worthy family Christmas crafts, and, lo and behold, a handful of letters that Mom and Dad had evidently kept for years. Jake creeps over, mid-smirk turning curious. As we sift through the box, it turns into something totally unexpected. We're chuckling over a photo of Dad dressed as Santa, which, honestly, looked more like a guy who'd gotten trapped in a department store Halloween aisle. Then we find a letter Jake wrote when he was 9, whining about his evil older brother stealing the remote during a holiday movie night. I'm laughing, but honestly, it stings a little. The way that kid felt stuck in some never-ending remote battle. Suddenly, this whole petty fight wasn't just about a plastic stick anymore. It felt like we were digging through years of family history, unearthing all these little moments where the remote was less about peace and more about control, moments that had quietly shaped our usual holiday chaos. Meanwhile, Mom wanders in, giving us the kind of look you give kids who've taken apart the Christmas tree just to find the hidden ornaments. "What are you two doing with my Christmas memory box?" she asks, half amused, half fake exasperated. "We're, looking for the remote," Jake says with a grin that's way too innocent for my taste. Mom sighs. Not the annoyed kind, but more this tired mom kind of sigh that means, you two are hopeless, but I love you anyway. Dad follows her in, eyes wide, probably realizing the peace treaty he hoped for just flew out the window, or under the couch, technically. By this point, the remote is nowhere to be found. We all start looking everywhere, retracing steps, checking under cushions, in the kitchen, behind the curtains, even the freezer, don't ask. But the more we search, the deeper the house feels like a shrine to every remote-related grudge, every sibling spat, every battle over what should be Christmas TV. And here's the kicker, as ridiculous as it sounds, the remote wasn't just lost. It felt like it had vanished into thin air at just the right moment, like the universe decided to stir the pot a little more. Jake narrows his eyes, elbowing me. Think maybe Mom hid it, so we'd stop being absolute maniacs? I laugh, but then the thought sticks around longer than I'd want. What if the whole thing isn't about who controls the remote anymore? What if it's about something bigger, this weird family energy we're caught up in every December? Mom returns with fresh mugs of hot cocoa, hand steady but voice holding a grown-up kind of patience. "All right, boys. No remote means no battles. How about we just watch what I put on for now?" Dad nods, settling back in his chair, but the tension, oh, it's not gone. It's just simmered down to something quieter, but you can tell it's still there. Jake and I glance at each other, satellites circling this weird, unspoken truce. I can feel the weight of it. Like that small plastic remote somehow switched from being our prize to a symbol of everything getting tangled up in ways neither of us can unpack right now. And that's when I realize Christmas morning or any morning with Jake is never really about the TV. It's about us, this messy, stubborn duo locked in a battle way bigger than just what to watch. So we sit there, the three of us and Mom and Dad, in this living room glowing with Christmas lights, no remote in sight, but a quiet tension that's definitely not ready to just disappear. And honestly, I start to wonder how long this peace will last. Because with Jake, well, you never really know. Eventually, Jake and I agreed to call a temporary truce. Truth be told, none of us wanted the remote anymore, not if it came with the kind of chaos brewing around it. Mom's suggestion to do a mom special Christmas movie took hold, and Dad even promised to make popcorn, which sounded like the perfect peace offering. Jake finally broke the silence, holding up the remote like some sort of trophy even though it had been nowhere to be found during the great Christmas morning scavenger hunt. Okay, he said, half grinning, truce for now, but next year the remote's mine from the start. I raised an eyebrow, smiling despite myself. Dream on, little bro, you're still the reigning snack thief around here. We both laughed, that warm, brotherly kind of laugh that's mixed with just enough history to make it complicated but still pretty great. The tension that had been suffocating the room thinned out, and the glow from the tree took on an extra cozy feel. What struck me most was how quickly everything had escalated, from a simple plastic remote to this full-on standoff and back to a kind of uneasy camaraderie. It made me realize that, with Jake, holidays were never just about the what or when. Ably. They were about the how we somehow managed to collide and connect in ways only brothers can. Later, as the Christmas special flickered quietly on the TV, this time controlled by the mysterious Mom Special lineup, I caught Jake looking over at me, no teasing, no challenge in his eyes. Just that familiar flicker of something that said, all right, maybe we're all right. And I thought, yeah, we are, even if it takes a remote war to figure that out. Walking past the memory box again that afternoon, I saw Mom put it back on the shelf with a knowing smile. I realized those old photos and letters were kind of like a family diary, written in static and long-forgotten battles, reminding us that every year, every holiday came with a little messiness, and that was part of the charm. So, what did the remote war teach me? Maybe that sometimes the battles we pick, and those we let go, shape the stories that actually stick. And with Jake, the stories are always going to be a little wild, a little chaotic, but at the end of the day, pretty unforgettable. And yeah, the remote was eventually found buried under Jake's bed because of course it was. He swore it was an accident, but I'm pretty sure it was a strategic retreat. In the end, Christmas wasn't saved by the remote or the TV. It was saved by the fact that, messy as it can get, we were still all here. Stubborn brothers, slightly defeated parents, and a little box of memories that reminded us just how weird and wonderful family really is. That Christmas, we didn't just settle who controlled the TV, we found a way to navigate the mayhem, and somehow, that felt like the biggest gift of all.